Welcome to the podcast for the world builders like you, where we dive into the spells and strategies for Black feminist world building and creative actualization. The weekly-ish podcasts and newsletters are presented by Cedar School, where all this theory that we get into inside the podcast episodes meets practice. Like we actually practicing what we're preaching, I should say, inside of Cedar School. And if this is your first time tuning in, CETA is a school with offerings for supporting you inside your world building and creative entrepreneurship practice. If you're a long-time listener, welcome back and thank you for being here. Listen, y'all, I'm not here in the name of altruism, right? I don't do selfless work. I gave that up a long time ago. What I've picked up instead is an understanding that my freedom is bound up with yours, right? So thank you truly for the work, for all the work, right? You're currently doing in order to get free, right? Because that's what keeps me showing up, and perhaps that's what keeps you showing up too, expanding the landscape of creative permission for us all. Speaking of creative permission, if you've been following the work of CETA School, you will notice that there is no open enrollment into the CETA World Retreat this summer. But, we will still be giving ourselves permission to pivot. Permission to Pivot is an 8-week creative writing and coaching container offering one-on-one support with launching a newsletter in alignment with your audacious desire instead of external validation. By the end of our work together, you will have seeded a creative writing practice and created 3 newsletters and more that you're logistically and energetically ready to publish. That energetically piece is like, it's huge, right? Because you won't just be writing, you'll be transforming through your writing. Now, sometimes the body writes what it doesn't yet know how to say, and vice versa, which is why we'll be developing both our writing and oratory skills and inclinations and ways of expressing inside the safe intimacy of this one-on-one container. Again, Permission to Pivot is an 8-week container for navigating public pivots in real time, right? It's for folks who are like, some got to change. I just don't know where to start. I don't know how to start, right? Together inside this container, we will collaborate with your creative fear and your creative spirit to make the public career changes that are more aligned with your deep desire and goals. So enrollment is currently open and closes on July 17th. Check out the link in the show notes if you're ready to enroll, or book a call to learn more. Book a what I'm calling the desire discovery calls. You can book that in the link in the show notes to learn more. And listen, y'all, the roster of private clients that I've already started working with this summer are already creating drafts of personal essays and newsletters. We're reflecting on, like, inside of and alongside of, and refining them like ahead of publication. They're creating frameworks for their writing and Substack. They're getting deeper clarity on their desires for public practice, and even returning to their creative practice with even more potency and power after being inside corporate careers for over a decade. And like, all this transformation is happening inside of CETA School, and we're not done. And that's why I'm inviting you to join us. Again, it's an 8-week coaching container. It includes 4 bi-weekly one-on-one sessions, but also includes the CETA World course, which facilitates the income-generating offer development work that happens inside the retreat. It includes the Worldbuilders Way to Creative Marketing Toolkit with 12 months of creative marketing support and a library of guided Black feminist breathwork meditations for grounding your nervous system inside of public practice. It can be a very public practice can be something that can like charge all of our stories, our wounds, our excuses, but then also are very real concerns for like visibility and the possibility of being doxxed and all of these like very real threats to our safety. How do we hold both? How do we show up in service to our desire while also kind of like addressing our very real fears for our safety and our survival, right? We hold both inside of this container. Again, the link is in the show notes if you want to book a desire discovery call to learn more. Enrollment's currently open and closes July 17th. Yeah, I'm excited to see you inside. All right, y'all. So now that I have kind of given you an update of what's happening on like inside of See the School and the work we're currently doing, before diving into today's episode, we're gonna slip into our podcast ritual here. We're gonna give ourselves permission to breathe into this present moment. We're gonna take a quick beat to become aware of our surroundings, to get curious about what's happening inside of our sensorium, aka our bodies, right? So I'm going to take 3 deep, full, slow, full, deep belly breaths, right? And invite you to do the same if that feels possible in this moment. And also, if it feels safe in this moment, I want to invite you to close your eyes. All right, y'all, let's begin. Hmm. Let's note one thing in our sensorium that we were able to kind of pick up in that pocket of pause, something we could see, touch, smell, taste, hear, something we were able to feel beyond the senses we have language for. Right? What can I sense in this very moment? I have my incense burning behind me. It is currently like giving thunderstorm outside. I'm right outside of Chocolate City, like 30 minutes outside of DC. And this downpour thunderstorm, the sky just literally opened up right before I started recording this. And it just feels like the perfect sensorial moment for recording this podcast and for what it is we're going to be talking about today. But what's going on in your sensorium? Now let's check in on our mood and intention right now in this very moment. Again, we do nothing without checking in on how we feel because we know how we feel actually will inform color and like our feelings will kind of filter through how we receive new information, right? So we want to check in on our mood, but then we also want to check in on our intention for doing a thing, especially when we're multitasking because that can help us place our focus where we need. It can kind of give us a framework for our focus when we're clear on our intention. So let's start out with checking in on our mood, right? My mood, I am recharged after my holiday vacation, which for me unlocked a desire to design my own writing retreats seasonally and perhaps even monthly. I'm usually such a routines girly and historically have found travel to be disorienting. I gotta pack, I gotta fly, I gotta travel, it's like, okay, I like my routines, I like the people I'm around, I'm good where I'm at. But recently, the change of pace and scenery has felt energizing for me and inspiring. So that's my mood coming off vacation, energized and inspired. And also, y'all, if I'm being completely honest, I'm also a little irritated, a little pissed off, if you will, because I ordered a wig from TikTok Shop 2 whole weeks ago, and they keep changing the estimated delivery date. So if you are watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you'll notice I have a hat on because your girl needs to take her braids down. So I'm energized, inspired, and a little tight. That's my honest mood. That's what I'm allowing myself to feel in this moment without judgment. What's your mood? How are you arriving? Can you give yourself 3 seconds to feel what you feel without judgment? Let's pause and check in there. Yeah, I'm looking at myself in the recording. It's like the bundles are fine. The bundles are thriving still. The braids, child, need a little refresher. All right, now our intention. My intention inside this episode is to reflect alongside you and the 4 seasons of creative practice or creative initiation, however you want to think about it. But I like to call it creative initiation. Uh, why do we reflect on these 4 seasons, these 4 phases, these 4 stages of creative initiation? It's to remind ourselves that we're not alone in this process, feeling sticky, liberating, confusing, and erotic, right? All at the same damn time. Inside of creative initiation, your hands may feel the fire while your feet may feel the sludge simultaneously, right? This is completely normal. But then again, what is normal anyway? Inside of creative initiation, there are seasons of remembrance, surrender, sacrifice, and erotic expression. Sometimes these seasons happen in order, and sometimes they're non-linear. What stage are you in? Will you allow yourself to believe it's exactly where you're supposed to be in this season? That's my intention behind recording this episode, to invite us to allow ourselves to be exactly where we are and awake to all the wisdom embedded in our current season. Not to gaslight you, but let's stop devising creative ways to get out of taking our own medicine. What would it look like to metabolize the ways life is inviting us to grow through the good, the bad, the ugly, the uncomfortable, and the easeful? Right? Sometimes the ease is part of the discomfort. But more on that later. What's your intention behind listening to this episode? What's your intention behind doing exactly what you're doing in this very moment? I'm going to pause here and let you reflect on that. Now let's get into today's episode, y'all. We're about 14 minutes in. Episode 81. Creative actualization demands sacrifice. As usual, I'm going to start with a little bit of a story time here. As I alluded to inside of our intention setting, from spiritual experience, I have observed there are usually 4 stages, phases, or seasons of creative initiation into a large project. We remember, number 1, we surrender. Number 2, we sacrifice. Number 3, and then we enter into a stage of erotic expression. Number 4. Again, these can be nonlinear. These can feel like they're happening at the same time. But for me and what I have observed, these seem to kind of be like the four stages of being initiated into a large project, a large creative project, right? And when I say large project, I'm talking about the work that can't be done in a weekend or even a month, right? I'm talking about the paradigm shifting work, the long form, deep work, the years long work that will transform and inform your practice for years to come. And by practice, I also mean your life, right? Your practice of living, of being here, of being in relation. My last paradigm shifting project was Psychofa. It's a speculative fiction novella that I researched and self-published inside of a series of artist residencies and fellowships in 2021. It's a project that I'm still eating off of in 2025. But this is a project that will make me work for it. Okay. It's a project that would take me through all four stages of creative initiation. It would inspire Cedar School, named after the protagonist in Psychofa. And this is a project that would also eventually create the opportunity to write the current novel I'm working on, which is taking me through the initiation cycle all over again. But back to Psychofa. I'll take you through my journey as an example of what this might look and feel like. First stage is remembrance. The remembrance process for me started while I was still at my full-time job, right? Not to be dramatic, but eventually I realized the corporate ladder I was climbing was slowly leading to my death. So I had the idea for Cedar School in 2019. I left my job to pursue it in 2020, yes, during the pandemic, but I didn't publicly start executing on it until 2021. There was Cedar Press before there was Cedar School. And it was through Cedar Press that I started sharing my Black feminist research and publishing zines cataloging this phase of remembrance. Inside the season of remembrance, I was abandoning the stories of success that I was given, and I started writing my own instead. Now we move to the surrender stage, phase, season. 2021 to 2022 was the season of surrender when I moved to Dawn, Virginia, onto land that my enslaved ancestors worked, then would eventually own and collectively steward. It was inside this season that I released the clinging to control over every outcome and surrendered to outcomes that were unknowable at the time, but would turn out to facilitate the most ease, pleasure, and power inside my practice. The organizing framework for my work became optimizing for nervous system regulation and breath versus external validation and proximity to the perceived safety of whiteness. I surrendered to the grief work. I listened to the guidance of the land when I felt lost and launched Cedar School as a school teaching folks how to code through a Black feminist lens. This was 2021 to 2022. Now we entered the season of sacrifice, y'all. All right, so in 2023, I entered the season of sacrifice when I had to come to the realization that teaching coding was in my zone of validation. It was more in my zone of validation than in my zone of desire. There was some overlap there, but right, even if I was teaching coding through a Black feminist lens, it still felt misaligned with my zone of desire, right? I kept feeling misaligned inside my practice because it was inviting me to stand on my desire to explore Black feminist poetry, divination, fiction, and world building, right? Explore these things beyond coding, but beyond software. I remembered in so many ways, coding, writing, and world building are all the same activities that just require different ways of showing up from us, right? So the fall 2023 Cedar World Retreat was born. Fall 2023 was our first cohort. I think since then I've launched the retreat 7 times. But this sacrifice, this public pivot was scary at the time because I was working with nonprofits and clients participating in coding curriculum I had created, and phasing out of this lucrative work felt irresponsible. I'm going to be honest. But deeper abundance is always on the other side of deeper alignment. And the retreat has generated 6 figures inside of Cedar School. And I'm certain it's because I got in deeper alignment with my zone of desire and kind of like placed both my feet there and stood 10 toes down about it. Now, fast forward to 2024, 2025, y'all. I am in a season of erotic expression with a business that is funding time spent inside my zone of desire and is allowing me the time, the space, the flexibility, right, to enter into a whole nother cycle of creative initiation around another paradigm shifting project that I also know is going to change the trajectory of my practice and my life. I am entering into a fresh season of remembrance, trying not to rush it because this time I'm familiar with the road ahead, right? Understanding each step inside the journey is an essential part of the creative process. I want to ask you, which season are you in? Are you in a season of remembrance, surrender, sacrifice, erotic expression, a mix of 2 or 3? All right, here are some guiding spells and prompts for helping you navigate the 4 seasons of creative initiation into a life-changing project. Keeping in mind the pleasure and the purpose is in the process, not the final product. The focus is to be present and breathe into the lessons of every season, not to hold your breath while you sprint toward the end, right? The whole point is living out your values, not rushing to create something to illustrate them. I'm going to say that one more time. The whole point is living out your values, not rushing to create something that illustrates your values. Talking about it and not being about it is actually very boring. Trust me, I would know. I tried it and was like, okay, let's wrap this shit right on up, right? Like let's like be done with this act. It's exhausting, it's boring, it's not fun, it's not sustainable. But actually, right, practicing our values, kind of like Miriam Kaba said, closing the gap between our values and our actions every day. That's the practice. That's the rigorous work that keeps us returning. So first up in our series of guiding spells and prompts is remembrance. Inside the season of remembrance, there is what Toni Morrison calls a shock of recognition. I love that phrase, shock of recognition. There is a flood that is so overwhelming, you don't know what to do with it yet. All that water, all that ancient information. You're trying to learn how to tread it, swim in it, wade in it, or float on top of it when rest is what's needed, right? More importantly, we do not drown in all this memory, all this story, all this data. We keep the air passages clear as often as possible and breathe through it. We don't run away from this season of remembrance, this flood. That's the first lesson. And the prompt that we can work with inside of this season, the question that we can ask ourselves is, what have systems of domination encouraged you to forget? What are your ancestors encouraging you to remember? Then there's the season of surrender. The season of surrender. How should I describe it? Remember how we used to sing "A change gonna come"? Well, baby, the change is here, okay? So the season of surrender brings change to our front door. This is the season of internal change, internal transformation, the quiet, slow kind, also known as grief. The marker of this season is grief. I'm going to say that again and again, right? Grief around our childhood, our trauma, our oppression, grief around maybe the markers of success or status or accomplishments we thought would finally ease the pain, right? Only to find out it's still there. This is where we finally allow the sadness, anger, rage, shame, etc. to surface. And finally, this time, we're no longer running from it. This is the season where you can't do nothing but feel. So you finally allow yourself to do so. But here's the thing, surrender is consensual. It won't settle in until we say yes. So here's a prompt or some questions for navigating your season of surrender. What is your fear teaching you about your desire in this moment? What are you finally ready to allow yourself to feel? What are you finally ready to stop running from? Now we're entering into the season of sacrifice. Y'all, now sacrifice, I won't bullshit you. Sacrifice might be the most rigorous one of all, right? Inside the seasons of sacrifice, your syrup of surrender, your grief, settles into the body and alchemizes as love inside your bones. The season of surrender holds internal change, whereas the season of sacrifice demands external change. It demands we take some action. It asks us to stop bargaining over the price of our breath so that we may inhale and exhale more freely. Surrender asked, the season of surrender asked, what will you allow yourself to finally feel? Sacrifice asks, what will you allow yourself to finally give up? What we need to give up is usually some pattern, habit, story, impulse, identity, performance, act, thing, or idea that made us feel safe in a past we have outgrown. We're becoming bigger. Our power is taking up more space. And at some point in this season, we finally let it. We sacrifice something, we let something go, we release something we were clinging on to. Right? This new power, this power that we remembered and reclaimed doesn't need the old ways of being that kept us safe. This power we remembered and reclaimed needs a safety it can shape. A handcrafted safety, something sturdy, something like faith. a prompt or question for navigating this season of creative initiation, sacrifice, right? It's a question I asked in the last episode. It's a question I'm going to ask again here because it's so important. In what ways are we bargaining over the price of actualizing our desire? Y'all, this is the season we can get stuck in for like for months, sometimes even years. It's like we do the remembrance piece, we do the surrender piece, we do the piece of internal change, we do our internal work, and sometimes we don't change anything externally, right? We don't allow the change, the transformation of our inner world reflect in our outer world, right? Which is just another way to say we don't take action, which can be one of the most transformative parts of the process, right? So in what ways are we bargaining over the price of actualizing our desire, of going all the way, of taking it a step further, of allowing our inner world to reflect our outer world and our outer world to reflect our inner world, right? Who or what do we need to say no to clear space for what we're calling in? What or who do we need to say no to clear space for our reclaimed power? Right? So that it may express itself in our physical, our material world. Right? Doing all the spiritual work without allowing for any material change is incomplete. All right. It's not all the way there. Sidestepping something there, right? What boundaries do we need to set with ourselves and others, right? Sometimes the boundaries that we need to set the most are with ourselves, right? It's like the closing of the laptop when the workday is done. It's the not checking the social media when there's no reason to check it, right? It's the releasing of work that makes us feel safe or has gotten us that has like secured our survival up until this point, but isn't the work that life is inviting us to pivot toward, right? That is maybe inviting us to do something beyond survive, right? Now let's enter into the season of erotic expression. Right. My favorite definition of this season is offered by Audre Lorde, who reminds us, quote, "The erotic is a measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. It's an internal sense of satisfaction to which, once we have experienced it, we know we can aspire." For having experienced the fullness of this depth of feeling and recognizing its power in honor and self-respect, we can require no less of ourselves. Close quote. That's so good. That's so good. That never gets old, does it? It's from Uses of the Erotic as Power. That is an essay that is the gift that keeps on giving. All right. What makes this my favorite definition, my favorite contour of this season of creative practice is the built-in accountability. All right. She says, in honor and self-respect, we can require no less of ourselves. As if to say, you can go ahead and play around, right? You can go ahead and act like you don't know what you know. But in honor and self-respect, why are you doing that? You know what I mean? Like she says, you can go ahead and stop pretending to forget what you already know now. Enough of that. You're not fooling nobody. And most importantly, you're not fooling yourself. That's what she said. right? In this time and in this season, we finally agree. It's like not only is it a mental or intellectual yes, it's a full body yes. A yes, we are ready to act on, kind of and express our truth through, right? The water of our memory meets the stone of our surrender and allows itself to be shaped by our sacrifice, which carves the landscape, which turns out to be the grounds for our erotic expression. And finally, finally, we are home. To summarize, again, here are some prompts this week to reflect on and to reflect inside of your creative homecoming. Number one, what systems of domination or what have systems of domination encourage you to forget? What are your ancestors encouraging you to remember? Number two, what is your fear teaching you about your desire? If you have a fear around moving to a new city or stealing time away from income generating work to write that book, then you know you must do it, right? And the only way to do it is to surrender control over the outcome, right? Surrender the myth of certainty and work with something sturdier like faith. Or maybe you're in a season of surrender where you need to kind of like maybe stop running from what life is inviting you to finally feel, right? To introduce potentially a new way forward, a freer way forward. Number three, what pattern, habit, story, impulse, identity, performance, act, idea, or even offer, right? Way of working that you need to give up that made you feel safe in a past you have outgrown? Again, I asked this question in the last episode. In what ways are you bargaining over the price of actualizing your desire? Who or what do we need to say no to? What boundaries do we need to set with ourselves and others? Sacrifice is the most rigorous season of creative initiation. So it might take the longest, but the process of letting go is not only necessary, but almost always worth the discomfort we must navigate inside of disappointing others. So be extra gentle with yourself inside this season, right? The season of remembrance and surrender, those are kind of like low-key solo missions. Those are inside jobs. We can kind of do that quietly, and no one would be the wiser. Sacrifice demands that we change something externally, which transforms this process of creative initiation from like a solo mission to a collective mission, something that we maybe need to get our family members on board with, our coworkers on board with, right? Our roommates on board with, our loved ones, our community on board, our partners on board with, our parents on board with, who like our children on board. Like we're going to ruffle some feathers inside the season of sacrifice, which is oftentimes why we avoid doing the work inside of it. And I'm here to tell you that work ain't going nowhere. All right. It's going to keep showing up until we actually kind of execute on it and gather the support we need to make moves inside of it. The last prompt, the prompt that's related to our season of erotic expression, right? Question, what does erotic expression look and feel like for you? What habits, practices, and affirmations remind you that in honor and self-respect, you can require no less of yourself? All right, y'all. Here comes the invitation. Feel free to use these world-building prompts as questions in your practice this week. And if you want support navigating your current season of creative initiation, then go ahead and book a Desire Discovery call to learn more about the 8-week Creative Permission Incubator I announced at the top of this episode. Let's work together one-on-one on navigating the seasons of remembrance, surrender, sacrifice, and erotic expression that your creative spirit is calling you into, calling you home to. Truly. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies of Black feminist world building while exploring how offering the skills and wisdom from our journey of transformation might seed, resource, and deepen creative practices rooted in collective liberation. Y'all, I firmly believe we came into this world creative, and we all came into this world with something to offer. And deep down, we all want to orient around politics of love instead of politics of fear. Right? These are the beliefs, these are the values we try to honor inside of Cedar School. The best way to support this podcast is by sharing it with a friend or taking a screenshot or a screen recording of the episode and sharing it on social media so other world builders can find us. Why? Because you will never, ever, ever, ever see a Cedar School ad while scrolling the metaverse. So I'm putting my faith in you and this work instead. I want you to hear about Cedar School from a loved one you trust, right? Not Meta. I'm much more interested in sustaining this work through word of mouth. So tell a friend to tell a friend. If you want to keep these episodes coming, I heard rating and leaving a review helps too. The second best way to support this is by becoming this podcast is by becoming a paid subscriber to the Cedar School Substack at $5 a month, but only if you have the financial capacity to do so, right? Your contributions to Substack help make this podcast possible. Until next week, so be it. See to it. Breathe through it.